technology. Uh, I see deputy directors here, the assistant director. I welcome you all, members of the DICT, members of the Lagos State University, um, members from outside the Lagos State University community. I welcome us all to this wonderful presentation that we are about to have. We'll quickly dive into the presentation, and we'll do a brief introduction of the presenter, our own very
we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are good.
Yes, we are good to go. So I want to welcome us all once again to this wonderful presentation. We'll be talking about everything data, how to tell a story with data. And I can tell you for free that you have the first person to tell you how to tell a story about data, Professor Enikumehin Oluwatoyin. Will be doing a brief citation of him, and we hope that you enjoy the presentation. Just stay glued, do not leave the platform, so you enjoy everything that we're about to give to you. I'll be sharing the slide for the screen for this citation now. I hope everyone can see the slide. If I can go on, please.
Yes, can go on.
Citation of the presenter, Professor Enikumehin Oluwatoyin. Enikumehin Oluwatoyin is a professor in the Department of Computer Science, Lagos State University, and the incumbent director, Directorate of Information and Communication Technology of the Lagos State University. He has a PhD in computer science with more than 20 years experience in public sector, ICT operations, and institution management systems. He has been involved in the establishment, management, and administration of several IT centers in many West African states. He is an advocate of IT intervention in all states with over 120 developed and deployed statutory software tools, ranging from surveillance tracking items to conventional AI-induced software agents, with major focus on cyber safety and process flexibility using technology. Professor Toyin Enikumehin is a versatile researcher, and his current research is concerned at developing software models for tracking emotions in information retrieval, content-based information retrieval, and natural language processing. He is a trained lead in the university's Cisco Academy, and is also lead instructor in the digital forensic and cyber investigation program, deriving from his vast experience and certifications in this domain. He is a member of several reputable associations, including the British Computer Society, American Association of Artificial Intelligence Researchers, and Nigeria Computer Society, amongst others. Enikumehin plays PlayStation at his leisure. So it's not just work, it's also work and play. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the presenter of today's lecture, telling story using data, Professor Enikumehin Oluwatoyin. Please, let's welcome him.
Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. That was a very deep one. You quickly went into the archives to bring out that profile. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I want to humbly welcome all of us to this session. And I do appreciate the time it has taken for colleagues and also members that have joined us. I've also seen external personnel that are taking time to be with us. I thank you all for your time. I promise not to waste your time, and I can assure you that it's going to be a very engaging time. At the end of the session, we will want to have feedbacks and comments from you that can drive further discussions in this area. And as such, if there are important notes that you wish to take down as the lecture commences, please do so. Today I'll be sharing my screen. I'll be sharing my slide via my screen. And the focus of this discussion is what we are all aware of. Is about coming to talk about to us around the concept of data storytelling. We want to use data to tell our story. And we think that this is an emerging area that, considering all the successes that have been made in other areas, it is important that we begin to consider how to make our thoughts usable by bringing in concepts that can help us achieve this. Of course, we cannot tell a whole story without understanding the perspective behind the story. And that is why our driving force today will be to look at these concepts and actually look at how we can begin to explore the availability of data to discuss perspectives around the concept. So the topic before me is data storytelling, how we can effectively and adequately tell a story with data. And our dear moderator has said everything about me, and that is enough to take to the bank. Thank you very much once again for that. Now, before we begin about the concept of data storytelling, let's even look at data story. What do we understand by data story? A data story is a narrative constructed around the set of data that puts it into a context and frames the broader implication. So looking at the story, looking at the data, it allows you to resonate around some global perspectives that can drive further meaning and can drive you towards decisions that are needed for any situation. We know that the purpose of gathering data is to process the data, turn the data to an information system that generates a decision. But aside that, the main context is about how do we arrive at that information. We have a story, we have a perspective, we have a narrative. And we look at the crispness in data. We look at this crispness as a factor that we can leverage upon to actually help us drive out those inherent factors that are in that story that are not obvious to the listener. So, but we must note that when you talk about data story, we are not talking about data science, we are not talking about data analytics, or that turns data into insights. Rather, we are bringing that insights around a qualitative narrative. So that is the first thing to note. It is not just doing insight from the data. Data science will help us drive insight from data. Data analytics will drive insight from data. No, data story will help us wrap those insights that have been driven as a qualitative narrative. And that is why it is important to understand in whole what we mean by data storytelling. It is just the process and an act of weaving narratives around data-driven insights. They are narratives. We are weaving it. You know, when you weave, you wrap it around to ensure that that data enough can tell a story. As we go on in this discussion, you will see reasons why it is more advantageous to leverage on the possibilities of using data to discuss a story rather than the verbose way we have been reporting stories. But what are these stories that we are talking about? We are talking about technical stories. We are talking about technical narratives. We are talking about researches. We are talking about stories that need an output. We are talking about financial discussions. We are talking about inflation rates, for example. The best way you can analyze this to somebody that will make sense is to wrap the inflation rate not by saying things are expensive. It doesn't make any sense. Things are expensive. The word expensive is ambiguous. What it means to you might not mean the same thing to another person. What makes sense is simple, that A is greater than B. Then as also time X, I was buying A at X less than Y. Simple. That is wrapping a story around data. So we leverage on many things, including visualization and compelling narratives. Data story in itself will help us to compel the account of that information in a way that sparks understanding and drives action. But one thing we must begin to note, that data storytelling is not the same thing as data visualization. When you talk about data visualization, we are talking about a lower level to data storytelling. It's one of those subsets of data storytelling because it's one of those ingredients that will be used in actually telling the story. Now, why do we need? What are the importance of using data, unit data, to tell our story? The first thing is that even when you want to report a research output, you want to communicate. And that's why when you present and professors, senior professors are listening to you, they will ask you, please communicate with us. Talk to us. We want to understand what you have done. We want to understand where we are coming from. We want to understand what you have achieved. So why do we need, what are the importance of data storytelling in communication? The first thing, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is engagement. I want to engage you. I want to talk to you. You are in my space. I am discussing this topic. I want to pass a message to you. I do not just want you to listen, waste time, and go. I want you to be expectant of the next thing I want to say. I want to engage you. Data storytelling will help you to engage the audience by presenting complex information in a compelling and accessible manner. So the complexity, the ambiguity that leverages your story, your research results, by the time you use data to represent them, you find out that it's easy to understand. And that is why across many fields, across arts, science, engineering, literature, anywhere, you find out that when you do a research and you are coming out to the result, somebody wants to have something that is specific. Somebody wants you to use data to tell us what you have done. At any level, that is the importance of data storytelling. It's engaging. So the complexity of what you have gone through over the flow can be expressed in simple terms, either by visualization, by any other instrumentation of storytelling. The other one is persuasion. This is very important when you have to present a report or a story to decision makers. And decision makers need to listen to you and take whatever you have submitted before them or presented before them to take a decision. It is essential in persuading stakeholders by conveying insight in a clear and influential way. There's no clear or influential way that is as crisp as using data to tell that story. You want to tell me that I must invest in Okada business. You can't tell me that because I am seeing many Okada walking around the streets. All I will be interested in listening to is that if I invest X naira, at the end of the week, how much do I make? The story is around data. And it is time we need to start adopting this process of telling our stories with data in order to pass clear information. Clarity. You know that when you talk about ambiguity, it is one of those areas that destroys the context of communication. In natural language processing, one of the key things that we'll be studying that has led to where we are is ambiguity. We have all seen the advancement of AI, the AI models and all of this. All of them are based on language model. It is a subset of natural language processing. Why do we have so much research in this area? It's because natural language are inherent of very, very unclear, ambiguous presentations. So in order to make sense, in order to connect to the person you are talking to, in order to engage your stakeholder, in order to persuade your decision maker, you need to be very clear. But what brings about this clarity? Nothing other than data. Data helps you to even have a pattern of discussion. When you tell a natural story, there are tendencies that those things you have said before are the premise. You even you still say them are the consequent. However, if you are using data to tell the same story, your analytics will flow. The insight you have derived will be wrapped in a way that the data can tell the story better than your natural presentation. And the fourth importance is that it creates an impact. You create a lasting impact. What do I mean by this? I'm discussing with you. If this discussion is done in an analytical form that I'm using data to discuss this with you, it is easier for you to snap that data and have that percentage on you. When you want to talk about the stock exchange, and I think we usually see this on CNN and many other television stations, you see when it is bearish and bullish, you see the green or the blue arrow goes up and the red one comes down. That snapshot of what you have seen, you won't forget it. The discussions around that, maybe Dangote fell 40%, another one went up 50%. You might not remember the directional implications of those sentences. However, the data snapshot that you have that, oh, this has risen by 40%, this has dropped by 10%, that sticks on your head. That is an example of the importance of impact in data storytelling. So with some of the importance, I'll look at it as the following. Looking around all the importance that comes around it. One, we see that it allows you as the narrator. It allows you as the narrator to be able to put the data in a broader perspective. And this is crucial because when you have a set of data that you are using to express a story, the perspective of discussion can differ. That same story, we can use data to tell that same story to different types of audience. It is the only structure that allows you to tell a particular audience this story in a particular format and tell another set of audience the same story in another format. All of them having a clear understanding that is impactful, that can help them take decisions. So it allows the use of tools that can break down the result into such visual aids. And of course, you know the connection of human with visuals. We tend to retain those things we have seen. And that is why it is important to start looking at the implication of not using data to express the stories that will be more impactful if data has been used. It allows the audience to have a fair understanding irrespective of their background. So it means that people with different learning styles can learn easily from the data story. Anybody seeing a graph and seeing the gradient can actually know the performance of your stock. Anybody seeing that, oh, there is a decline across the x-axis, he knows that there is a decline. A decline is always a decline. Anybody seeing an arrow going up around the y-axis knows that, oh, there is an improvement in sales. So irrespective of the audience, a great importance is that you can pass your message, discuss your data, discuss your story using data. The third part of this is that it allows us to break down technical complications and the ambiguity that contain the stories. Because you are using data to represent it, you are using a graph, you are using a pie chart. When you have a pie chart, you know that area that covers the largest part, that has the largest arc, is the area that has the largest percentage. Nobody needs to interpret that. So no matter how complex or how ambiguous, how complicated the story is, if you are able to represent it in data, you are connecting the decision maker and you are helping them to do what? To take decision and arrive at a correct decision in the shortest time. So we look at all of these importance and see that we must ensure that some things are very clear, because this is a very important concept. One, data visualization is not the same as data storytelling. Data visualization and data storytelling, initially when the concept of data storytelling was being used and people started adopting it as a framework, as a concept, There were interchangeable usage. However, the clear understanding of data storytelling is explicit. They are not the same. Data visualization is even a step in data storytelling. However, they work together to achieve the same goal, but they are not interchangeable because the data visualizations are just one piece of the data story. So imagine them as an aid to improve the process of rendering a story. So now let us understand where we begin the data story. How do we start this data story process? Data story begins with the understanding of the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants in this engagement, please note that data storytelling begins with understanding the audience. It means that depending on the audience, I might decide to use a data visualization tool that suits that audience. If I'm giving you my network performance diagram, what I will show to my technical colleagues at the Directorate of ICT is not the same thing I will discuss with management, university management, when I'm discussing performance and internet usage. While I can come up with the live boards and start showing them the latency, the throughput, the number of feed rates, the percentage of the bandwidth, the speed, and everything to my technical colleagues, I will simply be showing a graph management, telling the same story, telling the same narrative. But what am I doing? I'm trying to weave the occurrence, the narrative, with the way it has happened around the data. So when I'm trying to understand the audience, we must tailor the story around their needs. It means that I can tell the same story to students of secondary school and tell the same story to distinguished members of university settings. Because I understand the audience, the different data storytelling process will be used, tailoring the story around them. So I consider the demographics. I consider their concerns and their questions. And I will consider their preferred visualization styles. In the preferred visualization style, I give you a clear one-line example. One, when you want to give narratives to students of secondary school or primary school, your pie chart, your bar chart must be extremely colorful, must be animated. You will come and tell story, the same story to distinguished member of Senate. You will, the professional way to tell that story will be that you must not use more than 2 colors. So you are telling 2 stories, the same story to 2 audience, 2 set of audience. One, those in the primary school. 2 is about, say, for example, a generic story about COVID. You want to tell students of primary school about COVID. And you want to tell distinguished member of Senate about COVID. You are telling the same story. You are telling them the same narrative. You are telling them about the same 5-meter distance of what it used to be. What we would do for those in primary school was to use animated visualization tools that are very colorful, interesting to them. When you come here, you don't use that. You use what is scripts. You use percentage of those that are dead, those that are alive, those that have the potential of being sick. You use the narratives. It means that you are telling that story with the consciousness of the audience. So once we are able to achieve that, what we have to do is that we have to choose the right data, which is identify the key insights and trends. The key insights will be understanding that the data is relevant. Selecting data that is relevant to your narrative ensure that the audience is focused on the information that supports the story, eliminating unnecessary distraction. That data that you have just identified must have a meaningful pattern, because we are talking about a story. A story cannot be told without a pattern. You know that in a story, there is an introduction, there's a middle point, there's a conclusion. All of them must connect together in a way. The way they connect together is the pattern. So you must be able to identify the pattern within the data so that you will be able to present the valuable insight that resonates with your audience and contribute to the coherence of the narrative. This data must have quality. Ensuring the quality of the data is essential. And this step adds to the credibility of the story and ensure the trustworthiness of that presentation. So how do we now structure the story if we have understood all of this? Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, we started from data story at itself. We understand that the perception is about weaving the story around the data. We look at how do we present these stories. We look at one of the factors to consider at our audience. We look at the factors that can help us in delivering these stories effectively. We look at the differential the path lines between visualization and storytelling all around about the same data. Now we are looking about telling the story. How do we structure the story? If we say it's a story, it must have a beginning, then there must be activities around it, and it must end. The first thing is that we must have an engaging introduction. The data must be presented in a way that it allows discussion. In the first slide or the first page of your data storytelling process, of your data storytelling document, you cannot have something that is showing what happens as a consequence. You will have a narrative that will drive listeners, your audience, to wait to see what happens after that time out. So you must have a captivating introduction that captures the audience attention, drawing them into the story you're about to tell. Then, after that introduction, you begin to develop the story by presenting and developing key data points and insights in a coherent and engaging manner that is showing the relevance of that data. And after that is done, at the end of it, at the third part, you must have a powerful conclusion. This conclusion, but what is a powerful conclusion? You must have a compelling conclusion that will have captured all the story around the transition of your data from introduction to the end, such that it will create a lasting expression and users can take away facts that are seen to have summarized the insights. So with this, you have now covered the life cycle of data storytelling. Now, there are so many tools which we all know about visualizing our data. Data visualization is a concept on its own, is a subject area, is a research area of its own. But of course, this is being used as an instrumentation for effective storytelling, and they include all of these bar chart, line charts, pie chart, and a lot more. Nowadays, we now have many tools that can give you visualized content that can actually drive the content. But the context of this is that it is about driving your story, driving those content that you have around the set of data. Now, you see that if you might decide to use bar chart, line chart, and pie chart, but there are factors that determine which do you use. One of those factors is the type of data. Another factor is the type of audience. So all of these things are evolving, and depending on the understanding of the process of using data to tell the story, you can begin to decide on which to choose and which will help in presenting the narrative. So when you now have that life cycle, your process is now the process of crafting the narrative, because you already have the data. You know the data structure, you know the data format, that you craft the narrative so that you can tell a compelling and engaging story. Of course, establishing the setting, that is, set the stage for your data story by providing context and background information. This is just an extension of what we earlier said. Then provide key insights and create emotional impact. This is very important. Emotional impact is that those listening to that presentation can take something away from the data, can look at that data and interpret that data into so many areas as to the extent of their understanding. So then we have some elements of compelling data story. That is, what are the things you look after you have completed your data story? What are the things you look out for to actually convince yourself that, oh, I have some very, very compelling data story. Then I'm going to go and present this to decision makers. I'm going to go and present this to stakeholders. What are the factors you look out for? You must ensure that the data is clear and is relevant. clear data and relevant data. You must ensure that there is an emotional connection in each phase of the story. We have classified the storytelling process into 3 phases: the introductory part, the middle part, and the end part, the conclusion part. And the conclusion part is where you create an emotional impact that can be used to take a decision, an objective decision. Now, you must ensure that the data story should evoke emotions and create a connection with the audience. Use data to bring empathy, understanding, and resonance the story along the process to which the story has been formulated. Then, compelling visualization. You must look out for compelling visualization to ensure that you utilize and engage effective visualizations to make the data come alive and resonate with the audience. I want us to look at the emphasis on come alive. The data must come alive so that when you see the data, it makes immediate sense to you. Illustrate the data in a way that is visually appealing and easy to understand. One key factor is that the data must be explicitly clear to understand. You want to tell the story with the data, fine. We know that you are eliminating ambiguity, you are eliminating complexity, you are eliminating complications and technicality, but you must ensure that you are not losing the content and the data is easy to understand. So, how do you choose the right data for your story? You must ensure that the story is relevant, the data is relevant. Ensure the data directly supports your story narratives and key points. You must ensure that the accuracy of the data is ensured to prevent misleading or incorrect conclusions. You must ensure that the data is credible. That is, you use data from credible sources to enhance the trustworthiness of the story. And timeliness. Choose current and up-to-date data to make your story relevant and impactful. So it means that at the time we are telling our story with data, these are the 4 factors that we need to also put as checkboxes to see that this story that I'm about to narrate with this data is actually a story that can create an impactful impression. Visualizing data for maximum impact. We have, like I said earlier, there are so many lines around visualization. But what we do know that visualization will include the appropriate use of the visualization item, maybe the chart, the graph, whatever we want to use to tell the story. And essentially, we must ensure that we use the right color, the right sizing, the right format, the right positioning of the keys. A lot of things must be put in place. Anything we see as part of what you are rendering to us will be used, we will consider as one of those visualization entities. And of course, you must put maximum concentration to them to ensure that they actually render the idea that you want to pass to your audience. Now, so when you incorporate all of these techniques in storytelling, what do you have? You have a process that have allowed you to bring up your story around a data. Now, one area that is emerging is data history. It's an emerging area from data storytelling. After you have told your story, what happened to that data? That data is going to, but I think in the conceptual form of it, the initiators are avoiding archival, because I have seen that as a process of archiving the data and now can tell the story from the archived data, but in its own class is being referred to as data history. Now, for this, which is an offshoot of data storytelling, this data history comes from where? It means that at every time you are referring to a data story that have been used in the past, that data story must be relevant to that time. So one key factor is that it must be as appropriate for use as it is as at that time. So there are so many principles that has to be put to check in order to have a data story that can be related to. Of course, engaging your audience through data storytelling is important. And these are the factors that will help you to ensure that after you have told the story, we started from what the story is. We got to how to tell the story. Now we are looking at, after you have told the story, what are the things that you need to ensure that the audience gets a takeaway? One, you must ensure that there's an engagement, there's an interaction, and the story must evoke emotions. What do we mean by emotion here? In the sentiment analysis and emotion mining, what we do is that to understand that the emotion is not just your impression. No, it's about creating another thought from the data. I have presented a set of data to you, and I've discussed around the data. Using the data, I've told the story around the data. Now, the emotion that the only way I can relate to the fact that you understand the data I have presented before you is that you create a new knowledge from that data. By say you ask me a question that, oh, if this graph has been to the left, what happens? So it means that if there's no sales here, then this graph will drop. Those implications are the emotions that are created from that particular storytelling process. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is important we also have some generic examples of data studies, case studies of successful data storytelling. One, and these are things that we have come across severally, and just to put perspective to that, look at the financial report. Look at the financial report. It's called a report. But you know that when you get the financial report, what will make sense in any financial report, including university financial report, which is available online, is that you look at the data, the way they have used data to express income, the way they have used data to express expenditure, the way they have used data to correlate between the income, expenditure, and the budget. Now, the way they have used data to project around what is coming in the next calendar year. So it means that when the boss of a university is presenting the financial story of the university to the management of the university or to the council of the university, you'll be presenting that financial story, financial record. The data. We'll be talking to the data and be using the data to express knowledge. And that will create new insight, which we call emotion. To say, oh, if this expenditure has not been done, it means that the profit margin will have risen by 10%. That is a successful area where data storytelling has consistently been in use. Now, you look at the dynamic dashboard, such as the ones that are used in the communication, the server rooms to monitor traffic, or maybe the radio station rooms where you monitor the number of items connected to your radio station or TV or monitoring system. You have that kind of interface that you have in interactive data storytelling. Then you have infographics that is used generally. Infographics is very, very crucial and very common to relate to. If we can all remember the cases of COVID. COVID gave us, it was a very, very clear example of successful use of data storytelling. When we wake up in the morning then, waking up in the morning and going to the television, the first thing you see is that you see the state. You see states and you see the number of deaths. See state, number of deaths, number of occurrences, number of new hospitalizations, number of those that have been discharged. That is a complete data storytelling item. So it means that you do not even need anybody to tell you one word to know that if the death rate of yesterday is more than today is more than yesterday, then there's a problem. They must not go to some places. If you say, oh, the death rate of a state is high, higher than that of yesterday, you already know the story, the advisory notes that comes with that. Once you see there's a decline, then you can say, oh, let me relax and I can just go out and have a bottle of beer. But when you see that it is tightened up, that it is not reducing, you too will be considering that if it's not necessary, I won't go out. That is data storytelling. It allows you to relate the story around your personal interpretations, which drives a lot of consciousness into the process. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, rounding this up, we look at the tips for effective data storytelling, which are the things that we have said before now, that you have to know your audience. Once you know your audience, you keep it simple, make sure that it is simple, you can easily relate to it. I just gave the example of COVID. Use visuals and create a narrative that is easy around that. So, in conclusion, distinguished participants, There are these are things that I expect that we keep the thinking about and putting in use. But there are key takeaways, three key takeaways that I think can summarize all the concerns, especially with the thought of imparting participants to put data storytelling into use. The first one is that using data to tell story, we give the audience a deeper insight into the purpose of the story. I think it is important we know that. I think it helps us to summarize the lifetime of the story. So if using data will help you to summarize all the narrative that you have done in the normal conventional natural language form. So it helps us to analyze the lifetime of the story. And of course, it allows you to tailor the same story. You allow you to tailor it towards the audience. So if you have a story, you can tailor it towards this particular audience. The same story, data storytelling concepts will allow you to tailor that towards other audience as may apply. So there are 6 tips for effective storytelling, and that's the summary. 1, let us note that there's a need to use the right chart. And what I mean the right chart, I mean that the right visuals. What you use to inform is different from what you use to compare, and is different from what you use to change. For example, the bullish and the bearish example I gave in stock is used for information. When you want to compare, you use like a pie chart. Pie chart cannot be used to inform, cannot be used to show the bullish and the bearish. So the professional items to be used for each category of information. So let's use the right chart. Then the second one is that we check for legibility. Let's have a big font that is clear. Like, for example, if you are writing greater than or equal to, let it be greater than or equal to. Don't use the sign greater than, then equal to in front of it. There are symbols that shows greater than or equal to. So let it be legible. Let's keep it simple as number 3. It must also be simple. Then what you are highlighting is what matters, because data storytelling has a strength. The strength is that it's helping us to reduce ambiguity. So the strength is because we are reducing ambiguity, we must keep it simple, where we must highlight what is important. Then in data storytelling, when you are telling your story, do not use defaults. Don't use defaults. Do not use defaults. Try and create your concept around the story. Create your concept around the story and make sure that you make it accessible to intended listeners and users. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your attention and for listening. I think I would not want to take your time further. I draw the curtain for now here. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Enikume, for the wonderful delivery. It has been an engaging time since the beginning of the presentation till this moment. A lot has been shared within the very short time that we had. Let me just run through a brief things that I noted, more like a summary of the presentation. The first here is you have to understand the importance of the story you are telling with data. And in doing that, you have to ensure that the story should be engaging. It must have some level of persuasion. You must be able to persuade whoever you are telling the story to. It must be clear. Clarity is very important. And then most importantly, it must be impactful. So one of the things that also came out from this presentation is that the presenter was able to tell us that there is a clear difference between data visualization and data storytelling. As a matter of fact, visualization is just like an aid, one of the things that aid data storytelling. And to tell a story with data, you must understand your audience. Very important. If you do not have a clear understanding of your audience, then you will not be able to communicate effectively with your data storytelling. One of the things too that also came out from this presentation is that uh, when you want to tell a story, choosing the right data is key. And why that is very important is that the data has to be relevant to the story you are telling. there must be meaningful patterns of the story you are telling, and there has to be very high quality of such data. And he was also able to take us through the parts where you have to understand how you structure the story you are telling. Every story must have a beginning, the midpoint, like the body of the story, and then the end point. And the beginning must ensure that introduction of your storytelling must be engaging, because when you start telling a story and at the start of the storytelling the audience is disconnected from you, and then they won't get to the part where you have to drive home the message. You also must ensure that you drive a narrative with the data story you are telling, and most importantly your conclusion must be compelling. And some of the elements of compelling data story as he shared with us is that the story must be clear and relevant. It must have emotional connection, and your visualization too must be compelling. And to tell a wonderful story, you have to choose the right data. The data has to be relevant, has to have a very high degree of credibility, accuracy, and then it has to conform with the time you are telling the story. The timeliness is also very, very important. You agree with me, listeners, that all of this has been worth the while. We have not wasted our time, and the presenter has done justice to his presentation. Let me quickly acknowledge the presence of Mr. Samson Adejumo, a former member of the Web Services Unit of the DICT. I see him in the audience. Mr. Samson, we appreciate your presence, and every other person present here. So now we take questions, contributions from listeners, so we can engage the presenter before we call it a wrap. Thank you for being here. So questions are welcome, contributions are
Thank you
welcome.
very much, moderator. Thank you so very much. Thank you. That was a wonderful rapport. I join you to also recognize Mr. Abdullahi Nosiru, joining from Australia. Abdullahi was a member of the ICT and has left us for Australia about 10 years ago. Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullahi Nosiru, for joining us. We recognize you because of the distance and the time difference. Every other person also recognize or you for your different time difference. We need to give you that consideration. Moderator, I have seen a question here.
Okay, sir.
And that question is around how do you guide against using data to support biases in storytelling? It is clearly, sir. And that's a good question. The way to guide around that is that, data does not use ambiguity. It does not allow ambiguity. X equals to 15 is X equals to 15. X is greater than 15. It means that X is not anything less than 15. So using data itself takes away ambiguity. Meanwhile, ambiguity is the first level of biasness. What allows biasness is ambiguity. When you look at the concept of opinion mining, where do you drive the opinion from? There's an idea. That idea is the opinion, but that opinion is based on the basis of some occurrences in the past, the experience, or the exposure to a story or to a narrative. So your biasness are not just existing from nowhere. They are existing from an occurrence in the past. But data storytelling, the data will not allow you to use that impression to create the data because it won't make sense. It won't add up. You want to say for every sale, there is a 5% commission. There's no way you want to tell that story that the calculation will not be that for every sale X, put 5% of X plus Y. So that's Y is what was already existing. So no matter the biasness you want to put into it, having the right data that supports, and that's why we draw attention to the fact that if you look at the slide, I mentioned about using the appropriate data about 3 times. Using the right data that supports the narratives will help you to tell a compelling, clear story that avoids ambiguity, that allows stakeholders to connect to it. And I think that is what we should take note of. So I don't know, maybe there are other questions.
There are other questions, sir. Yes.
Okay, please go for it.
There's a question asking you to elaborate on the type of data and how it can be used in storytelling.
Yes,
Elaborate on the type of
we
data.
of course, the student participant, you know that there are several types of data. Several types of data. I give you a very clear example, and that clear example is the example of COVID. That was a data storytelling process. How it can be used is that you must, first of all, the first thing to identify is not the data. The first thing to be conscious of is the story. What is the story you want to tell? The story about the result of a machine learning experiment is different from the story about the sales in a liquor shop. The story about the occurrences of Agbero on Lagos Road is different from the story around those that are having malaria or the occurrences of pharmacovigilance. So the story will drive the type of data you use. So the first thing is not about knowing the data. No, it's about knowing the story. Now, when you know the data, now there are data visualization tools. What do we mean by that? You have a data. There are tools that will help you to render the data in a way that people can look at it and connect to it without having to say, I want to look at the data itself. So look at it generically. Imagine that you have a presentation with the president. I don't think there's, no matter who you are, you can't have more than 20 minutes to present to the president on any. You have an idea that, oh, your idea would make $1, 1 naira, and it seems to make sense to your local government chairman, escalated to the governor of the state, they talk to the minister and they say, oh, no, come and present to Mr. President. I can tell you, you won't have more than 20 minutes. So if you're having more than 20 minutes, if you're having 20 minutes, each minute you must make sense because these guys don't have time to waste. So the story is not about, is the data itself is there. You have woven your story around your data, the narratives around the data. Now the second part is visualize the data. And that's why we said the visualization is a level in storytelling. So what we need to identify is that once you get the data, once you get the story, there are several data sets that will be dependent on the story you want to tell. And that can help you render the story appropriately.
So, sir, there's another question on closely related to biases too. How do we prevent misconception or wrong interpretation in data?
You said what? Sorry, I was looking at how can we?
How do we prevent misconception or wrong interpretation in data during a data storytelling process?
How can you prevent misconception?
Yes.
Of course, those are very personalized items. There is no clear-cut way of saying you want to prevent biasness at that level. But of course, the import is clear. Once you say something is a variable remains a variable. But if I can decide that I say, oh, this variable is not satisfying me, I expected to see a variable that is a large integer. I can say I want to say a large integer. That I'm not satisfied with a large integer. That is another thing. That is dependent on how. And meanwhile, all of this begins at how far have you been able to crisply narrate your story into data. Mr. Blind also sent me something directly that even biasness can begin at the level of data collection. So if we are collecting data and you're already biased in the data, we say, for example, to the hospital, go and get want to do a research of pharmacovigilance, and we say, go and get the number of persons that has to go to the hospital again in 2 weeks after treating malaria, that have to report back to the hospital to treat the same malaria. Then you report that, report the number of persons that are suffering from adverse drug reactions. If you get to the hospital and you just see a random person and you just take reports from that person without getting those primarily involved, there are already been a bias in that data. Everything around that data will be faulty because the interpretation at the end of the day will be faulty. So what we have to do to ensure that when they are even interpreting it, they do not misinterpret the data is that make that data make it sensible. Make it clear. Use color to say this is failure. Look at stock exchange. They will say when the stock is bad, they use red. And they now put an arrow down. Nobody will interpret that data as improvement. Nobody will say that is a good record. Everybody knows that that is negative. And when you are improving, the stock is improving, they use blue or green to raise it up and put the arrow up. It's clear. So when the narratives are understandable to you, the narrator, then you can transfer that understanding into the data visualization item that is to be used.
So, sir, the last question here is in two. The first part is, what is the effect of collaboration in data storytelling? And the second part is, what is or are the challenges in data storytelling?
Thank you very much. Let me take the first part, which is the area about the challenges around collaboration, right? Collaboration, the prospect of collaboration is always a positive thing, because we like the general knowledge and adage that when two comes together, they are better than one. I think what you don't see another person says it. But the problem is that you must first of all, if you look at my first slide was about identifying your goal. What do you want to achieve? So if you do not identify the actual goal you intend to achieve, and you are collaborating with someone that does not have that full understanding of what you intend to achieve, that combination, that union will be in nullity, because you won't be able to achieve anything that is usable. However, if the goals are clear, then the conflict comes in the area of decision as to what do we use to visualize. Because there are no clear-cut rules about a particular item to be used to visualize. What I said is that I said the story must be understood before you wrap it with the data. But after wrapping with the data, you want to cast it as an item to be visualized, to be seen. There's no clear-cut rules as to what to use, but there are best practices. Now, a scientist will tell you that, oh, because it is being used by everybody, I don't want to use it. It does not make sense. So it means that you must convince the other person. The disadvantage in that is that at the time the two of you are engaging in agreeing on that concept that might not really be important, you are wasting time. You are wasting time. So it means that the consciousness about collaboration, the danger of collaboration is that you must understand what the aim is. The aim must be clear before any two persons or more comes together to say, let us have a collaborative effect in this data storytelling process. Secondly, the second is the challenges of what? What is the second question? Please go for it.
Challenges of data storytelling.
The challenges of data storytelling is that if it requires you to be very conscious of the story. Because if you are not conscious of the story and you don't note all the facts in the story, if you miss out an important item in the story and your data is not representing it. For example, I give you a story about the generic automation of the insulin injection material. The insulin injection material is a material that is used to pass insulin automatically to people that are diabetic. This injection looks at your sugar level. When it is high, it infuses insulin and balances it. That narrative is a narrative. Now, if you are telling this narrative and you forget to identify as a variable the gender of the item, you might have missed a very large part of either the research or the implementation. So once you miss a part of the story and it is not represented as a data to be referenced, to be visualized, then the story is almost destroyed. So the major challenge in data storytelling is about the need to understand the story. Now, the big problem is that how do you understand the story? A third party will not understand the story like you, the primary actor that has gone to the field. So it means that transferring research, you might not be able to carry out an appropriate data story on a secondary report. because you do not have the clear understanding of the report as much as the person that has gone to the field to gather the documentations for the report.
There are direct questions to your chat, sir.
Okay, I can see one. How then do we resolve the issue of biases on data imbalance on a given data set? There are processes that are modeled for reducing biasness in data. The first level of biasness, like rightly said, is from collection. But when you see the imperfection, and that is why the concept called the fuzzy logic concept has been used to reduce biases to a very great level. And that is why fuzzy knowledge will not tell you that anybody is tall, anybody is rich, anybody is short. It models whatever you are as a state of a space between 0.0 and 1.0. So you relate to people across that rate, that boundaries. So what this means is that the biasness, if you are biased in your collection, it will not make sense. It will not cure. You are collecting the age, the date, you want to collect the age group of students in LASU, and you just simulated anything and write it out. There's a way you see the demography of those distribution, and you find out that something is wrong with this data. So even visualizing that data, you will find the fault. So the first thing is that once data is collected, to remove biasness, clean the data. Data cleansing is one serious criteria that can help you to reduce biasness. Once you cleanse, because in cleansing the data, you have a physical, like a pseudo-physical interaction with the data that can allow you to have further insight into that data, which means that you can even put that data. How do you cleanse the data? You put each of the data to perspective and see if it has meaning. So in checking if it has meaning, you understand that, oh, this data is driven from this perspective. This is different from this perspective. This cannot be included in this set. Then that will prompt investigation. And of course, you see the loophole. Second one is that what modern tools can you recommend to manage? There are so many tools. There are so many tools. Of course, I don't want to relate you to AI tools, which seems to help you do anything that have been done. But I think I can reference you to many machine learning models. Thousands of machine learning models can help you manage data and preview data stories, many of them. You can even write your own data story model in Python, depending on what you want to achieve. And that is why we say that this is a personalization entity. This story that you want to tell is dependent on how you are telling it. See, when you see those that are telling about the story of the Yorubas, and they want to tell you how we left Ife, of course, I'm not from Ife, how Yorubas left Ife, they will tell you, they mean the same thing. At the end of the day, if you use data to tell that story, you get the same result. They are saying the same thing. But if they use verbal narrations, there are going to be several disparities. Why? Conceptual narration, ambiguity, language rendering, syntax analysis, lemmatization, a lot of things will come into place that will not allow two words to mean the same thing. And in rendering those things, they have different meanings. So the best we could do is to actually identify which story do you want to tell, which data do you want to use. Then once you identify data you want to use, then you can now choose the model that can help you to preview or prevent the mismanagement of that data set.
The questions keep coming in.
Yes, I have a question from Mr. Samson Adejumo. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Samson. When pitching to a diverse audience with varying levels of data literacy, what strategies can be employed to communicate complex data insight in a way that it is accessible and easily understood by all stakeholders? Thank you, Mr. Sampson. That question drives me to what we used to do. And in explaining complex things to common men, we look at LCM, lowest common multiples. Lowest common multiples. But what are conceptual lowest common multiples in this instance? The first thing is to identify the audience. Now, and that's why you see that when I said the first thing I said that how do we begin the process of our storytelling? I said identifying the audience.
I tell you, you will have a brilliant speech to a wrong audience, and it will be as if you just wasted their time. Because that story is not meant for them. Brilliant speech. That the same speech you went to VI with professionals, bank professionals, all of them are clapping for you. You came to my department, all of us is to you, we are just looking at you. You must understand the story, the audience. Right. Number two, after understanding, knowing the audience, what do you have to do? Which is your question. What you have to do is that relate to terminologies that are generic to everybody across any level. Do not use area-specific terminologies. Do not use area-specific terminologies. For example, if you are talking to me, you are talking to a student, you are talking to a secondary student, you are talking to a market woman. Do not use anything that has to do with an area that is not generic. Use something that commonly we are all open to. For example, when you are using scenarios, do not use the classroom scenario to discuss with them. Use the bus scenario, that I'm entering a bus from one place to the other. Even the market woman knows that. But if you tell the market woman that you want to teach a course, CSE 201, and students are not coming to market, she cannot relate to it because she has not been there. But when you say we are entering a bus to go and buy tomato, and you want to find the shortest path, that which according to you use, because a Gondo is close to Lasso, does not make it the shortest path at an instance, because shortest path is determined by the instance, by the what time of the day. What makes the shortest path from Igondo to Lasso? If there is traffic, it won't be a shortest path. What makes Lasso to Ikeja the shortest path through Igondo might make my two the longest path through the other path if there is some condition. So it's depending on the time. So what you use is that you relate to entities that are generic across board. So, and that is the lowest common entities that can be used to explain such occurrence. So it's an evolving and a very common incident to have audience that are far away from your area of expertise, or they have diverse knowledge. So while some are expecting what makes so much sense, what is technical, some are expecting what is so low. But what you have to do is that those that are expecting what is so technical can relate with what is so low. But you do not want to lose anybody in the audience. You want to drive everybody along. One of the key things I told you today is that you must get everybody engaged. And one of the ways to get them engaged is that let them understand what you are saying. Now, the interesting part is that those that are high up there, like the Professor Moros and the rest of them, that are high, that can relate to any understanding, they can understand little things as well. And they would, in fact, drive insight from those little things. So when you want to tell the compelling story and you write it as a story, for example, the kind of story you write is that instead of using mathematical framework to write that expression where you have a market woman, you can just say that, oh, the girl is selling, you draw it, you have a diagram or a picture where the girl is selling and the girl is shedding tears. One thing is obvious from anybody that sees that image, we know that is either the girl did not sell at the end of the day, or and if you had an image of when the sun is getting set, that the sun is setting down. So it means that the girl did not sell his money. It means that the girl has lost her money after she sold. You will know that something negative has happened, which you can use to represent any perspective of the story you want to tell. That same story, you can tell somebody else in another way. So the simple, ladies and gentlemen, depending on the type of story you want to tell, depending on the type of audience you have, the best practice is to get your discussion low. And as you engage them, as they continue to interact with what you are doing, you bring up the interactive presentation along those lines.
Final question.
Yes, please, let me have it.
Is there a universal framework as regards data presentation and storytelling? The basic minimum that should be included when telling story?
The basic minimum, the only universal framework is that you must visualize. That is the most important part. That is the basic one. Every other thing is dependent on your audience. But the most basic one is that you must visualize. Once you are talking about data story, don't let it end at the transforming to data. You must visualize the data. And that is why you see that data storytelling goes to data visualization. You must visualize the data. Your data storytelling is not complete a global rule is that once you tell your story with data, visualize. It is not sufficient to tell a story with data and not visualize. You must visualize the story. Let that data speak. Let people see it. Let them close their eyes and see. And you don't even talk. You don't have to say anything. And let them make meaning from it. That is the kind of story that is creating emotional knowledge. By seeing it, you can imagine a lot of things. Whatever you see, you create an idea from it. So that is the only universal law, that once you have wrapped the story around data, visualize it. Now, the skill that is required here is that, how do I visualize? You must look for items that can help you visualize your chart, your image. You can create an image, you can create a picture, you can do anything. You can use a picture of a slum to describe what happens in the slum. Anything that can make people look at it and relate to your story. But don't forget, for every story, you must connect back to the goal, which is the aim of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sir Professor Enekume, for the insightful, impactful, and a presentation that has worth the time. Let me also especially appreciate our audience, our listeners, who has been with us since the beginning of this presentation till the end. Let me quickly inform us too that this presentation has come to stay. By the month of April, we're having 2 presentations. Month of May, another 2 presentations. The month of June, another 2 presentations. That means we have 6 presentations that have been scheduled up to the month of June. We'll inform accordingly on the subject of presentation and individuals to handle the presentation as we go on. I want to thank us sincerely for being here, for sharing your time with us, and for listening through to the end of the presentation. I hope that by the next presentation, you also join us to share with us our time, the knowledge you want to share, and share also your contributions as the presentation is done. Thank you so much. We'll meet again by the month of April.
I thank you so much, my distinguished audience. Thank you very much for being here. I recognize Adelawal from London. Thank you very much for joining to share to also take part in our presentation. Thank you very much. And Dr. Mustafa asked that if it's an instructional material. No, it is not an instructional material. Storytelling is not an instructional material. It's a rendering, process. It's a rendering item. It's not an instructional material, but it's a rendering item. My deputies, thank you very much. I can see Mr. Shiobi and Mr. Fadipe sometimes. I thank you all. The host, you muted us, you didn't allow us to talk. Don't be a bad guy. Thank you very much.
Can unmute and share their contributions. Yes. We wanted a seamless presentation process, that's why. So if there's any contribution or greetings, we can do that now before